us remain standing as we affirm our faith.
The gospel reading is Luke chapter 23, beginning with the 33rd verse. And when they came to the place which is called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right and one on the left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him vinegar and saying, If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said to him, Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. This is the word of God for the people of God.
That moment that we just sang has always been so moving to me. Here's a man who's right at the end of a undoubtedly sorry life, and he no doubt has much regret. And yet you know that in his life, like all of us, there was much love. There were great dreams. There were moments of great joy. He draws to the end, he reaches out to Jesus and says, Remember me. It's what we all want in our deepest selves, just some connection. We want some love. We want some mercy. We really want to be remembered. And so does everybody else. In 1992, Rodney King was front and center of the news. He was the man out in California that was beaten nearly to death. It sparked all these riots. Dozens of people were killed. And Rodney King, after he'd recovered and the riots just wouldn't subside, he made a statement where he said, Can we all just get along? I mean, we're all stuck here for a while. Let's try to work it out. It's almost as if he's speaking to America today, right? Can we all just get along? One of the ways to get along is to understand who we are and who other people are. I'm reading a book. I thought I'd finish it last night, but I fell asleep. I think it was all the festivity of the Nathan Arledge wedding here. Just, oh my, that was amazing. And the book I'm reading, though it's a bestseller in the field of sociology does not have many bestsellers, I should say. And it's a book by a guy named Jonathan Haidt, and the title of it is The Righteous Mind. And what he does in this book is he compiles all kinds of studies from psychologists about why we believe the things that we do and why we have the political preferences that we do. And the amazing thing that comes out of all this is we get this wrong every time. I think, whatever it is that I think politically, and I'm so right. And all the facts are on my side, and all the logic is on my side. And those other people, their brains must have shut down. Something's just profoundly wrong with them. But They're actually thinking the same thing. And what the studies show is that where you are politically is not a matter of facts and reason and logic as much as you want to think it is. It's actually something subterranean in you, something underneath your known self. It might have been planted in you when you were less than 2 years old, and there's all this stuff in you. It's sort of the same kind of what Haidt uses is the idea that we think of a dog wagging his tail, and it turns out all the reasons and facts and logic that we have, that's just the tail. The dog wags the tail, and the dog is your emotional self. The dog are your intuitions, and whatever that is, then you find logic and facts to go with it, and you hear facts that are contrary to it. You just can't deal with that because you're still the dog. You came today hoping you'd be called a dog, I'm sure. It's the same thing we said back during our Emotionally Healthy Spirituality series. As Peter Scazzaro, who came to be with us from up in New York, he said your inner life is like an iceberg. And there's the tip of the iceberg that other people see and that you see and that you're aware of, but that's only a small fraction of yourself. The biggest part of yourself is like an iceberg. It's that part that's submerged under the water and other people don't see it. You often don't see it yourself. If you go to a psychiatrist, you learn a little bit about it, but you never get in touch with all that, all those subterranean, those feelings and darknesses, and it's why you react emotionally to all kinds of things in surprising ways, and it feels like it's not quite tamed down there. And that's actually the part that drives you. And you may hear that and you think, oh, that's good. That helps me understand those other people. But it's true of all of us. And it's the cause that we have to get along. Even Jesus on the cross said, they know not what they do. We don't really understand our inner selves and why we believe what we believe about politics and such things. Richard Rohr wrote about this. He recently commented on all the present evils and corruption and hating and frustration that's all going on in the country. And what he says is all of this, I hope you'll buy this, all of this is a symptom of the greatest disease facing humanity, and that is our profound sense of disconnection. Sin is thinking we are separate and superior to other people. But if you think you're better than anybody else, if you think you're smarter than anybody else, if you think you're superior to anybody else, then you are enslaved to your ego and what Richard Rohr says. Then you wind up with a God who takes sides and is angry. I just want to say to you, God doesn't take sides, and God most certainly is not angry. Let me say that again. God is not angry. There's a lot of anger down here, but God is not angry. It's what we see in the story of the crucifixion of Jesus. What we see is immense, unfathomable love. God entered into our mortal life, and on the cross, what he achieved for us there was forgiveness. And we get forgiveness wrong sometimes. We think that forgiveness is when God forgives us for those things we know that we did wrong, and we ask God, we apologize to God, then God forgives us. Actually, it's bigger than that. God looks at your submerged self that you're not even aware of, that darkness in you that drives you, and God even forgives all of that. God has mercy on your darkest, most mysterious self. And that's good for you, but God also has mercy on the darkest, submerged self of the other person, too. You see, Jesus comes to be king, and he's a different kind of king. He's not like any kind of king in the world. What kings do is they rule, they have power, but that's not really Jesus' game. Jesus comes, he doesn't have a palace that's a sumptuous building somewhere. His palace it's a lowly manger. Jesus doesn't ride a war stallion like Alexander or the great Julius Caesar, the great warriors through history, Napoleon. Jesus rides on a humble donkey. His entourage is not armed Roman soldiers, but it's just a bunch of clueless disciples who used to be fishing just a little while ago. It's sort of like the plot in The Lord of the Rings. I love Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, the books and the movies. And see, what happens in the story is there's the one ring of power. There's this ring, and all power is held by whoever holds that ring, and the ring falls into the hands of one of the hobbits named Frodo. If you know what hobbits are, these really short people, and they live in the Shire, and they don't really like to travel and get out much. They just kind of like to have their beer and stay home and kind of enjoy their life. But here Frodo comes upon this ring of power, and everybody else wants it. Everybody's trying to get that ring because they want to wield all power, either for evil or for good purposes. And what Frodo has this intuition that instead of, see, what Frodo could do is, I've just been a little hobbit all my life, but I could rule the world with this. But instead of keeping the ring of power, what he knows he has to do is he has to destroy it. Because as long as there's power, somebody gets crushed. As long as there's power, there is corruption. In the Lord of the Rings, there are always those who think, if I have the power, I won't be corrupt. But even the wise Gandalf knows that if I had that power, even I would become corrupt. Jesus' way is not the way of power. Jesus had all power, and he gives up that power to come down and to be humble, to love. That is what Jesus' kingdom is about. It's all about love. It's all about mercy. We have something we've learned in recent weeks is that we in the church have so much work to do in our city and in our world. Just staggers the mind. And we've got all kinds of stuff that's coming up to try to work on things. The Myers Park clergy are meeting with a lot of people trying to think, how do we help people figure out how to get along in our city? We have our 100K mission series. Well, all the stuff's coming, but I don't know about you. I just have this idea that God at this moment just wants us to take a break, to pause, and just to rest, have a little Sabbath. Aren't you exhausted by everything that's gone on in recent weeks? Aren't you weary of the news? Aren't you weary of the tension? Aren't you weary of the turmoil in your own gut? Isn't God asking us just to be still, to have a Sabbath, to turn off the TV, to turn off the phone, just to be quiet, just to rest, to know that God is God? And above all else, to be thankful. We get Thanksgiving wrong a lot of times. What we do at Thanksgiving, or we just miss it, it's so sad, is Thanksgiving Day comes and we're grateful that we're able to have so much food and that we live in such a fine home, and that I have such a wonderful job, and that I have this great spouse, and that I have my health, and we're thankful for all of these things, but we forget that those are the kinds of things that divide us from other people. Those are the kinds of things that invite us to think, I've done a little better than other people. I think Jesus invites us to be grateful for those things that everybody has good cause to be thankful for. So many examples. I preached a sermon, I remember this years ago when I was in Davidson. It was about this time of year, I'm sure, and I was preaching a sermon on gratitude, and the sermon was all about how we are great debtors to so many people. There was a woman in the church who didn't like me. I know you're shocked there would be someone in the church who doesn't like me, and her tribe is larger than you'd imagine. And at the end of church, I'd preached the sermon on great debtors, and she came out, and this was amazing to me. She put her finger in my face, and she said, I don't owe anybody anything. And I just thought, I have never heard sadder words. We are all great debtors to so many. I want you to go with me on this for a few minutes, if you're willing. I want you to remember with me now the day that you were born. And you may say, I can't remember the day that I was born. But you can, actually. Because you've seen other babies, and you know who was there the day that you were born. And what you know, even if your relationship since then has become fractured with one or more of your parents, What you know is that on the day that you were born, there were two people who were so very delighted that you just existed. You cried and they held you and cared for you, and you didn't ask them for anything, you didn't thank them for anything, but they loved you anyway. We're going to be thankful for that, all of us. You think about when you were a child, you probably had some playmate, maybe you remember their name, maybe you don't, make you remember scenes of, playing. I loved it. Nathan's wedding last night, by the way, we had the wedding here and then went over to the reception. And the DJ started the music, and the adults weren't dancing very well, or not many of them, but there were a whole passel of kids. In Nathan's family, there are a lot of little children. My goodness gracious. And they all hit the dance floor, and they were just dancing like crazy fools. And we all got video cameras watching them. It was cool. And what you have to know is once upon a time, you were a crazy fool like that. Right? Like, I don't really dance because I'm kind of self-conscious, and I don't want anybody to think I'm a crazy fool, but at some point, you were 2 or you were 4 or whatever, and you were uninhibited, and there was some child who played with you, and that was so cool. It was so cool. You were connected. You were loved. Maybe you had a teacher or a coach who just took an interest in you. I had a coach back when I was in junior high school, and I don't know why, he just cared about me, and we've stayed in touch all these years. He'll call me, I'll call him, we'll catch up. I love this man. He loved me when I really needed somebody. He encouraged me when I really needed encouragement. Somebody went out on a date with you. Like, how much mercy was in that? And maybe you got your heart broken, but if your heart gets broken, at least you know you have one. At least you know that you can love, that hearts are tender. It's a beautiful thing. Maybe you have a lifelong friend. Isn't that amazing? Your friends aren't just the people you've known for a year and a half. There's probably somebody in your world. You knew them a long time ago, and you still know each other, and you always will. I remember 2 of my best friends when I was on sabbatical. We were driving around Scotland, and one of them brought up the whole issue of same-gender marriage. And we're talking about it, and one guy said, well, the first thing we have to do is we have to define marriage. And so the other guy said, well, marriage is when people love each other and they're committed for life. I said, that's us. How wonderful. Lifelong friends, guys I met in college, still talk all the time. Something to be thankful for. I'll remind you of the question I was asked at confirmation class from our 8th graders 2 weeks ago. What's the hardest thing God ever got you through? I don't know how you'd answer that, but God got you through it. You're still here. You're okay. Here's what. It's something to be thankful for. The man says to Jesus, Jesus, remember me. Here's the best news that I can think of, is that we are always remembered in God's mind and God's heart. I think about my dad's wife who's had Alzheimer's for so long. She doesn't remember him, anybody. And we tend to look at that and think, oh, how horrible, and it is horrible. But in God's mind, she's not forgotten. All of her life is gathered up in God's good heart. Whatever happens to us, that'll hold for us. Here's what Jesus really wants us to be thankful for this year, and it's that Christmas is coming. I don't know how you feel about Christmas. I'm probably going to say the wrong thing. Lisa and I were a little bit surprised last night. We were driving home from Nathan's wedding, and we saw Christmas decorations lit up all over the place. And just me, it's like, it's November the 19th, but it's fine. We get Christmas wrong, though, right? Because we think, oh, it's about getting the decorations out and the party planning and the trip planning, and you've got to get just the right gifts and got to get them wrapped and got to get them shipped and planned. And